Hi, good afternoon, and welcome to another installment of our new show, Mending Fences. We're coming to you from the family's version of the conference room table, the kitchen.
This is Charlene Goodman. She is the office administrator at Hedayati Law Firm. I'm Janine Barbera-Dalli. This is Al Hedayati, and we're going to cook for you today.
Hi, everyone. Again, we want to bring this show to everyone in their homes, and we figured what better way to do it than do it from the kitchen. While we cook and we have a drink, we can help answer questions based on what we think are in the minds of the audience, and hopefully we can be of help. Obviously, if you ever have any questions, you can feel free to contact us, and it's always a free consultation. So we're here to help. But the topic of the day, we're going to leave it to the judge. So go ahead, Judge.
We're going to talk about today how you hire a matrimonial attorney. So while we start that discussion, we're going to make a drink. And the drink we're going to make today is an Italian sangria, which is somewhat different than a regular sangria because you don't need to let it sit. So I'll read you the directions on how I made it, but I already have it in here, getting cold. And it's 4 ounces of Italian red wine. It's 1 ounce of limoncello. It is 1 ounce of sweet vermouth, which I didn't bring, but it's in here already. 1 tablespoon of granulated sugar and 4 ounces of orange juice. Just shake it all up, and we'll have a nice drink while we discuss. Al, you want to start the discussion? How do you think they should pick a matrimonial attorney?
So the most important thing in selecting a matrimonial attorney is really to interview as many attorneys as possible, male, female. It's very important for you to feel comfortable. I know that running an office for the last 16 years, some people do call and say, I'd prefer to have a female attorney, for example, or a male attorney, for example. So, but it's nice to have that diversity, Judge, and oh my God,
Salute.
I can have a drink and then talk more.
Yes, you can.
Salute. Delicious.
It's pretty good, right?
Thank you, Judge.
You're welcome.
So the key here is to interview as many people as possible so that you will eventually feel that whoever you feel more comfortable with should be the person you go with. And what I mean by feel comfortable, Judge, is you're putting your trust in someone. This is the most emotional, if not most sensitive, time of your life, and you know that, and I know that, but I hope the listeners know that. And for that reason, it has to be someone that you trust. Look, the bottom line is, can you trust this person to do work for you even when you're not there, right? Because a lot of the work that an attorney does is back office and done by telephone conferences and emails or conferences with the court that the parties are not present at. And I think the judge, I touched up on that at our last show a little bit, that when a divorce actually goes to court, the parties rarely ever see the judge, right? So the key is everyone goes to court because you're required to be in court as a litigant, plaintiff or defendant. However, you don't get to see the judge every time. Your attorneys go in the back, they conference the case with the judge, they present their positions, and then the judge makes the certain determinations. That is why we always talk about picking someone you trust, but also trying to keep it out of court. Because both Judge and I feel that if you keep it out of court, you'll end up actually being more involved in your case. And I think the involvement in your case is what every client that I've ever represented, they always say, when do I get to speak, Al? Why am I not going to see the judge? And that's just the process. And it's very hard to explain to clients, but if you really want to be involved, the mediation or an uncontested divorce matter is certainly the answer, because you'll be in that office having what's called a 4-way settlement conference, and you'll be facing your spouse with your attorney there, so you can actually see that the work that they do. But anything else that you can think of, Judge?
Well, I haven't had lunch, so I want to talk about the food a little bit.
Okay.
This is what we're making today. We're making ditalini with zucchini and fresh tomatoes. Now, this is a great dish for women or moms who are on the go, or dads who are on the go and don't have a lot of time to cook. A lot of this can be made in advance because it can be eaten cold or warm. I've warmed it up a little bit, but in here we've chopped up the zucchini, and I chopped up some onions and some tomatoes, but I also put in some fresh tomatoes, so they're not fully cooked. And I have the little ditalini here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to start serving it out, and I will address some of the issues Al just spoke about as well. Most people get their first impression of an attorney by asking somebody they know who's been through a divorce. Don't you find that, Al? You get a lot of people coming in as a referral source from people who they know have been divorced already. Okay, so as I put this on here,
Definitely,
just so
Judge.
you know, hold on one
Keep-
second.
I'll-
I'm addressing my pasta, hold on.
Okay, hold on, but they can't see what you're putting in.
I'm putting in olive oil, right here, just
Just,
some
you can never
virgin
have enough
power
olive oil.
And I'm putting in some
Balsamic?
balsamic vinegar, just a drop.
Now, is this a special type of balsamic that you prefer to use, or?
Anything
Not that we're
Italian.
promoting any particular brand.
Anything
but-
Italian, and we always put cheese because Italians use cheese at all times. And then I also
little
brought a
Parmesan
little
cheese?
Parmesan cheese that's already done.
Graded and ungraded, right?
That's correct. Okay, and I'm gonna serve this to our guest.
The guests.
Thank
food
you so
taster.
much.
You're very welcome, and I'll make you one also, Al. Yes, so the good thing is that it's not a bad idea to get a referral from somebody who's been through a divorce. The bad idea is to then follow that person's advice. Because you talk to your friends and everybody knows somebody who's been through something, and oh my God, my divorce took 7 years, my divorce took 10 years. That's not the norm, okay? Divorces can take a long time, but they don't have to. So remember, and everybody's case is very different. You can't judge what your divorce is going to be like from your neighbors, okay? So you've got to be very careful about who and how you listen to people.
That is one of the hardest things, Judge. I'm happy you touched up on it. The hardest thing is really, clients always say, well, my friend got this in this amount of time. And you just cannot compare two cases. First of all, there's so many different factors. The judges are all different. Each judge's part rules are different. So you just have to understand that when you hire your lawyer that's been doing this for some time, they're gonna be familiar with the court's rules, that particular judge's rules, and not everything can take the same time, so two cases can never be compared. But I thought that when you were talking to your friends about it, Judge, you perhaps were going in a different direction, and I don't have a problem talking about it. I thought what you meant was specifically talking about, hiring a lawyer that's been, because that's what we're talking about, how do you pick your lawyer? A lot of lawyers that have gone through the process themselves and have experienced it, they feel that that's an important thing. And that's certainly important because you've been in this, in the shoes of someone you're representing. And I think that's an important factor. Thank God I haven't been through anything like that myself, but I have family members that have been through it, and I know how it feels. And being that we've represented so many litigants in Long Island and New York City area throughout the years, we certainly do feel what the litigants go through. And again, if you trust your lawyer, you know that they're trying to reduce the anxiety and the pressures of divorce as much as they can. But you're gonna be able to see that relatively quickly in the representation as well, Judge.
Well, I've been through a divorce, and it was very many years ago, because I'm going on 30 years of marriage, God help me. But yes, I've been through a divorce, so I can touch upon a little bit about what the clients come in and talk to us about, which is why I always try to counsel them to go through mediation instead. Now, mediation, we can talk about what that is and the difference between a regular divorce and mediation. Mediation means that the two of you come in and meet with a mediator who preferably is an attorney, because those are the best mediators. You want somebody who can tell you what the law is, even without giving actual advice. They can tell you what the law is, how a judge, certainly the way I do it, how a judge would decide the case. Being in the court system for as many years as I was, I know how a judge is gonna decide. I know how I decided. And by the way, just a PS point there, judges don't wanna decide your case. They want you to decide your case, and that's the beauty of mediation. In mediation, what you do is you actually talk to the mediator and you discuss what you and your spouse are interested in doing, what you wanna do, where you wanna go. Because once you're in the court system, you don't get that opportunity to speak to a judge. Certainly, as Al pointed out before, 9 times out of 10, you won't even see a judge. right?
You don't see a judge, but also another important thing that I'm thinking of as we speak and eat your wonderful food. It's
Did you
delicious.
try it?
It's delicious, I did.
Thank you.
I just don't wanna eat too much on TV, but it's delicious. I'll eat it right after the show. But the point that you made, Judge, I don't see, if two people are living in the same house and they've managed to, keep the peace and live in the house, whether you have kids or not, I don't see why you couldn't do a mediated agreement, because you're doing the same thing. You're just gonna talk openly about it with a mediator who doesn't represent either side. A mediator is impartial. So again, if you're living in the same house and absent exigent circumstances of domestic violence, I really don't see why every action or matter cannot start at the very least with mediation, especially if you're living in the same house. If you have a cordial relationship with the other side and you're talking, and by the way, just because you do mediation does not actually mean that you can't have your own representation.
That's correct.
So if you could talk a little bit about that,
Sure.
because everyone thinks, oh my God, if she's not representing either one of us as the mediator, then could I miss something legally? And that's not the case either.
So the mediator, I'm sorry, the mediator is more of that person just kind of facilitating the conversation like you would have in the kitchen with your family member. They're going to be your guide and your facilitator then?
Absolutely. In fact, I prefer when people have their own attorneys so that they can go back to them and say, this is the discussion that we had in mediation. Can you tell me if I'm missing something or if there's something that I should be aware of in the next mediation session? I encourage that and I invite it. And I tell them that right at the table. If you have somebody that you want to talk to before we even get an agreement in writing, do it. Because once an agreement is in writing, they'll come back to me and we'll go over it again. But then I will make them take that agreement to an attorney of their choosing. Because at that point, then they need to go over it and completely understand what they're signing. The last thing you want as a mediator is somebody coming back a year, 2 years later saying, I really didn't understand what I signed. She really didn't explain it to me, or I wasn't represented. You don't want any of that.
Yeah, so it's a misnomer to think that somehow because the mediator takes a middle ground and an approach of sitting there and listening to both of you, that for some reason you lose your right to counsel, which is a very important right, and you can never lose that under any circumstance. So we encourage people to have another set of eyes look at it. And the reason we do that is because a mediated agreement with two names for attorneys that represented each side or reviewed the documents, it solidifies that agreement. And there's nothing we want more than that, because the last thing, as Judge said, we don't want people coming back 2 years from now saying, I didn't understand what I signed. So we encourage another set of eyes looking at it and making sure that that particular spouse understands the terms and conditions that are set forth in the agreement.
Now, after the agreement is mediated and there is a solid agreement in place and both parties sign, what happens after that? And basically it becomes an uncontested divorce, okay? Because the agreement is the meat and potatoes of what the two of you had decided upon. And that is then incorporated into the uncontested divorce documents. Now, any attorney can do the uncontested divorce documents for you. We will sometimes recommend a couple of attorneys, or if they have an attorney that they've been using all along, that attorney can certainly do the paperwork and submit it to the court. It's a much faster way of getting divorced, because if you go through litigation, there are those cases that do take the 6 or 7 years, and most of the time it involves custody. Quite honestly, those are the big cases. And the last thing you want to do is to have a contested matrimonial with a custody case.
So I want to circle back right to what we intended the show to be about, is how do you know what attorney to hire and what questions you ask, or what's the process? And just what we just explained to the listeners, we're open, transparent, and honest. You want to find someone you can trust. Basically saying, you know what, you want someone else to look at it, go right ahead, right? Because the last thing you want to do is feel like you're locked in with representation that you don't know what something means or needs to be explained to you. But again, it goes back to that level of trust that you need to have when you hire someone. And the reason is, most important time of your life, everyone gets through it as long as there, again, these exigent circumstances. But I would say 9 out of 10 cases could be resolved amicably, which is why we always, when someone comes into our office, we encourage mediation and uncontested route first. Look, if that doesn't work, you don't lose your options or choices in going and filing the divorce and serving your spouse. It's just when you serve someone, everyone gets litigious, and there's plenty of attorneys out there, Judge, that wanna say, oh, you were served,
Absolutely.
now we gotta do X, Y, and Z, and everybody puts their guards up, and all of a sudden a mediated agreement can fall apart.
There is something that I do want to touch upon, though. The attorney who promises you an outcome, a particular outcome or a guarantee, you should be running the other way out of that office as fast as you can. No attorney can guarantee any outcome, and any attorney who tells you they can, run away, okay? Because it's not true. The attorney you want can give you the options, and they shouldn't puff you up with expectations on what you should expect. There are a million reasons why a particular divorce case would not turn out the way an attorney suggested it would. You could have a difficult judge, or you could have a judge that thinks differently. You don't know how the other attorney is going to react with the other client. You don't know if they're gonna be litigious or if they are going to come to the table and wanna settle. There are too many factors that you can't predict. So anyone that tells you, oh, don't worry about it, you're gonna be just fine, here's the way it's gonna work, run away. A good attorney will tell you the things that could happen, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And if you don't want to hear the good, the bad, and the ugly, then you're really not looking for a good attorney. You're looking for a yes person.
So Judge, there's so many people that'll come and say, I met with someone else and he said this. And look, 2 attorneys, 3 attorneys, they could all have a different approach to a case. That's different.
Correct.
But we, by our code of ethic, are not permitted to guarantee outcome, how long your case will take, and how much it'll cost. All those 3 are related anyway. And that's actually in our retainer agreements, because we're not allowed to do it. And everyone always asks, Judge, please give me an estimate of what I'm looking at. And I can't do it. So I know there are people out there as lawyers that do it and say it, but as a listener, this is the stuff that I'm trying to explain, and Judge is trying to explain, is that, you know, an attorney can't give you all the answers. An attorney is simply your advocate. And guess what? That judge could determine the outcome of your life, which we think is better done by you and your spouse, not even us, right? You and your spouse have decided to get married, possibly have children, and its best case scenario is for you two to sit down and work it out. Obviously, either through a mediated agreement or with your separate attorneys, or mediation with your separate attorneys, because you are going to be involved in that process. So run away, as Judge said, from people that'll say, oh, I can get this done for you for this much. Unfortunately, all of our retainers are supposed to be on an hourly basis. There's a reason for that, because we cannot guarantee how long it'll take. I've heard of attorneys charging per appearance, or attorneys charging a flat fee for a divorce. First of all, it's unethical, so they're putting their own professional conduct in question. And secondly, we're not allowed to do that based on the New York State laws that we have to abide by as attorneys.
We're also not allowed to take a matrimonial case on a contingency basis. So that's illegal as well.
You wanna explain the contingency?
Contingency would be that you only would pay the attorney if they won or if they did a good job for you. You can't do that. You can't do that in a matrimonial. You can do that in a personal injury case and in some contract cases, but you cannot do that in a matrimonial case.
Yeah, I'm faced with that question quite a bit as well. Oh, if this happens, and it's not an if then, the separation of hiring a matrimonial attorney is different than the outcome of your case, and you gotta keep that separate. It is not a car accident case
Right.
like Judge indicated.
So-
What else are your thoughts, Judge?
I don't know. Charlene, what else did you want us to say on that topic?
Well, keep in mind that not everybody, not all of our viewers might have experience dealing with a divorce or might not have somebody close to them. If you're taking just the average person who comes in, someone who's either contemplating filing for divorce or somebody who's been recently served, what's the number one thing that you would want to say to that person before they walk out of that kitchen or that conference room with you? What's your number one piece of
Let me
advice
think
for that person?
Yeah, Judge,
Okay.
I'm still chewing. They're
First
delicious food.
of all, I tell them, this is going to be the most difficult thing you've done in your life. And that's the truth. It's a very, very big decision to decide that you want to split up your family or split up from a spouse, regardless of how long you've been married. You have invested yourself and your time into this relationship. And it is one of the most difficult things. People, have therapists equate it with death. In fact, the grieving period is very similar. Someone going through a divorce is to someone who loses a spouse. So they need to keep that in mind. The second thing I say to them is, do you have a therapist or counselor that you work with? If not, I encourage you to please do so. Your attorney is not your therapist. Your attorney cannot be your counselor, because your attorney is going to have to say tough things to you. And you don't want to spend your $500 an hour, which is around what you're going to pay for an attorney, for them to listen to your woes and to try to make you feel better. That's why you need a therapist. So those are the first two things that I tell them. And then the third thing is, I used to tell them, when you retain me, everything's my problem now. Let me handle it. Let me be the front person. Don't get involved in any kind of confrontations with your spouse at this point. Let everything run through this office.
That's very important, because I always, if two parties are talking and on talking terms, I like them to do that, but not if it's a litigious matter and
Right.
everything is being used against you. That's when you have to go to your attorney. But another important thing, Judge, and I'm gonna tell a quick story.
Go ahead.
And my staff, some of them are here today, so they know that it's true. What happens is, we don't encourage divorces. We facilitate them for people that are at that point. Even when people come for an initial consultation, I encourage them, if I find out they're on the fence about it, we've actually given the number of certain marriage counselors to them in order for them to go seek marriage counseling. It's very important to do that. The beginning of my practice, Judge, and I don't know if you know the story. So the beginning of my practice, I walked into court, in Nassau County. I don't want to mention the judge's name, but myself and the other attorney actually got yelled at by the judge because the husband was making out with my client in the back of the courtroom, and the judge thought we were encouraging the divorce. Why are two attorneys here divorcing this lovely couple? That ended up being a scam by the husband. My client was the wife, because he was nowhere to be found. He would show up to home 2-3 nights a week, and then the other times he was out and about doing his own thing. But for court purposes, he came and he manipulated her because she was still emotionally connected to her husband, who she had 2 kids with. So I understand the difficulty, but you have to understand what the motives of the other side are as well. If you feel that your marriage still has a chance, please work on it. We encourage that. I'm not facilitating for people that I think, it's not my decision, it's their decision. And I always tell them, when you decide that it's time to actually move forward with a divorce, then you can hire us. But I don't want to be put in a position again where it's at all, has the portrayal of impropriety of somehow, as if we as divorce attorneys encourage such things. We don't need to. There is plenty of divorces on Long Island. If we could save a marriage, we certainly would prefer to save a marriage, especially if there's kids involved too. And it's one of the number one reasons why people actually stay in a bad marriage, is because they have young children and they're looking out for their own kids.
But that was the point in saying that's why you need to have a counselor or a therapist, because that'll come out in therapy. If in fact the marriage can be saved or is salvageable, or one party wants to still try, that's where it comes out, not in the attorney's office.
Yeah, and attorneys in general don't have a very good reputation, but that's not all attorneys. And my experience has been, this is another story before we end the show for this time. We certainly will have more shows and more stories to talk about. They think that if somehow there's a relationship between myself or the opposing counsel, somehow that's a bad thing. Somehow, if we're professional when we walk out of the courtroom and we're working the terms out amicably, somehow people just want to be like, well, why are you shaking his hand? Those are all good things. I've been doing this 16 years. I am a shark. If anybody knows me out there, knows that I fight for all my clients, and I'm their advocate, and I'm their staunch advocate. However, a good relationship between two attorneys, saves you money, because there's no reason for two people to butt heads and file motion after motion for things that are unnecessary, and it gets you to the closure as fast as possible. Finish the divorce as fast as possible so that you can move on to the next chapter of your life, and I think that's really important too. What are your thoughts about attorneys that you have good relationships with, as opposed to people that you may not have the similar kind of relationship?
Well, those are the attorneys that you can settle a case with. It's, there's a whole group of attorneys out there in the matrimonial world. But it's a small collection of them. And you know who you can settle a case with right away, and you know that it's gonna take a little
Well,
more
you
time.
said that. You said
Yes.
it depends on the judge and
Judge
it
and the-
depends on the opposing attorney. And
That's
sometimes I
correct.
say that to people because we don't know who's gonna represent their spouse.
Exactly.
And a lot of times they say, look, ask me some more questions when I know who's representing your spouse. And the reason is, it's as easy as picking up a phone and scheduling a sit down with the parties and their attorneys to work things out.
So if you're a shark, what does that make me? Barracuda?
Barracuda, you're the judge. No, what I want people to know is everyone always wants the theatrics. It's not
Yes.
theater. You know
Right.
what I mean? And I'm not here, you're not here,
Watch the time.
your integrity is much more important than anything else.
Absolutely.
But am I a loud attorney who fights for my client's rights? Absolutely. But does that mean that that's actually beneficial to the client? Absolutely not. And I want everyone to know that. If you want the show, then hire it for the show, but it does not necessarily mean you're gonna get the best representation and the more cost efficient and the best results. They're not related.
All right,
Anything
Charlene.
in closing, Judge?
No, just that the next show you get to cook, Al, so I'm
I'm
very
gonna cook
excited.
it. The next show.
Hedayati Law Group will be coming at you with one more show, just very shortly. We'll talk about how our firm will represent you with honesty and integrity. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Thank you, everyone,
Thanks for
for
joining
joining
us.
us.